behalf of SAIApractice, we'd like to welcome our members and our friends of SAIAshare, especially those who are attending for the first time. Thank you for your support. My name is Gillian Ardendorf. I am the Vice Chair of the SAIApractice Committee, Eugene Barnard, and I will be your hosts this afternoon. With us, we have Karina Gibson from ECPD. Karina will make sure that everything runs smoothly, and if you have any issues, please just inbox for the solutions. We're very pleased to also acknowledge and welcome our sponsors to the event. Thank you very much, Christopher Knight from Safel Group. Your sponsorship is making this a possibility and a free event for the architects, which is really appreciated. For those who have attended SAIAshare before, you will know that we have 2 power-packed presentations on every first Friday of the month. Please participate by posing questions in the question boxes to the presentations so that we can have our speakers communicate back with you. In session number 2, we have Paul Carter, who will be sharing with us a little bit later, and I'll introduce Paul. But in the first session, Eugene will introduce Tanya Glavas, who's not unknown to many of us. Thank you, Tanya, and over to you, Eugene, and we look forward to a very interesting afternoon with some very interesting topics today. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Yes, from my side as well, welcome to all the attendees and to the panelists. It's lovely to have you with us this afternoon. So, you do understand this is our version of T20 cricket, and we do hope that you're going to be stimulated and motivated by what you're going to be hearing this afternoon. Tanya is a professional architect. That's Tanya Glavas. She graduated from WITS in 1996. She has run her own practice for the past 20 odd years in Johannesburg, I believe. In 2010, Tanya completed the Association of Arbitrators Fellowship course. This opened new doors to her career and new opportunities. And these opportunities include acting as arbitrator in building disputes, assisting parties with contractual queries, and acting as expert witness in disputes. As a member of the SAICAP disciplinary tribunal, she sees and has seen the cold face of practice in architects in South Africa, the practice of architecture in South Africa. Tanya is also the convener of the GIFA Practice Committee and represents GIFA on the National Practice Committee. Tanya, it's great to have you and your energy and your honest approach on the committee as you serve SAIA and its membership. So for me, it is really a privilege to introduce you here as you discuss the broad subject of disagreements in our profession and in the industry as a whole. So Tanya, over to you. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Eugene, and hi, everyone. So I'm here to give you some tips on your professional agreements and more specifically, your disagreements. In this age of heightened consumer awareness, more of the public is pursuing claims against professionals and other entities. As architects, our role is to be inspired, innovative, practical, technical. The last thing we need niggling at the back of our minds while trying to be creative is some legal situation that might transpire somewhere in the future. Let's take a walk through a typical story in our workplace. Look at what could go wrong and discuss the preventions and the remedies. So, you get appointed to design, let's say, a small office. Your client loves your ideas, is satisfied with your fee, and agrees on the terms of the contract. So you're basically in that honeymoon period. You receive your deposit and begin the design. You're somewhere halfway through your services, let's say stage 3, and out of the blue, you receive a WhatsApp from your client. It says they won't be continuing with your services any longer, and they decided to not to build anymore. It could be for any reason, really, but it has nothing to do with your performance. Now, let's face it, cancellation is never good news. At this point, you may be under the impression that as long as you have been paid for the work done, that is fair. Well, it's actually not. You have set aside time in your work schedule for the full project. You may have even rejected other jobs because of such a project. Always cover yourself for your time set aside by means of a termination clause already in your client-architect agreement. Such a clause should provide that a percentage of the cancelled parts of your services are paid for. Typically, this would be anything from 10 to 15% of the total balance of the project. And it really depends on the size of the project, and you decide what that is. So that's all about termination clause. Next thing, let's say the client refuses to pay the percentage, and they're making all sorts of excuses like, well, you knew this project was subject to getting financed, etc., and nothing to that effect is in the agreement. This is where a good dispute resolution already in your agreement is your saving grace. Let's discuss the different types of dispute resolution. Firstly, the quickest is mediation. Typically, the decision made by a mediator only constitutes advice and is not enforceable, unless there is agreement in place that such a decision would be enforceable. Next up, adjudication. This is enforceable, but subject to appeal by arbitration. Now, arbitration too is enforceable, but not subject to appeal. So arbitration may seem like the best solution, but it's pricier and more drawn out. Nothing, however, compares to the time and money spent on a litigation. Litigation, of course, being the standard court procedure as we all know it, and you should avoid. Now, the reason professional disputes are best decided by these alternative forms of resolution, mediation, adjudication, arbitration, is because the decision maker, who is the arbitrator, let's say, is a senior professional in the same field as the dispute, and is also, of course, trained, qualified, and a registered arbitrator. I suggest your dispute resolution provides for an initial, short type of decision-making process like mediation, and just to be sure, do stipulate that such a determination is enforceable unless and until it's varied by an arbitration. I often see awards that are subject to an appeal not being paid by the losing party with an excuse that they're in the middle of an appeal process. Well, that won't stand. Awards are definitely due as soon as they are issued, and the court can be approached to immediately enforce an award. Such a written decision constitutes a liquid document. Now, if at any time later the award gets overturned by arbitration, then that is a separate procedure. The second thing you want to include in your dispute resolution is a neutral nominating body, the one who nominates the decider, who is, of course, the arbitrator, mediator, like we said. And when I say decider, of course, I mean that. The usual nominating body we see most in our client architect agreements and also in our building agreements, you'll see it in the JVCC agreement, is the Association of Arbitrators. Once the decider is nominated, make sure that he or she declares they are not personally acquainted with either party, professionally or personally, and that there is no unilateral communication allowed between a party and the decider during the proceedings. So all parties and the decider communicate openly with each other at all times, and this is normally via email, virtual meetings, and the live hearings. The third item you want to include in your dispute resolution is a set of rules that govern the procedure. I recommend the Association of Arbitrators Restricted Representation Rules. These provide that neither party may be represented by a lawyer unless they both agree to. Why is it a good thing, you may ask? Well, unless you are wealthier than your client, you're not going to afford the level of lawyers they're going to appoint. In my own experience, lawyers tend to turn the whole process into a typical court litigation. We all know when it comes to litigation, attorneys are excellent at delaying proceedings, and top advocates can make anyone doubt their own professionalism, even when they know they're right. No one wants to be aggressively cross-questioned. Look, it's quite easy and possible to write one's own claim in defense. And one may receive the advice of a legal professional. Where there's no legal representation, the arbitrator is in fact allowed to take a more inquisitorial role, advising both parties equally as to what information they are required to submit. So that's my advice with regards to dispute resolution clause. We now move further into our story. Let's say the project isn't cancelled, but continues well into the building stage. You provide a detail to the builder, he follows it, and it doesn't work. In fact, he has to demolish and rebuild parts of the works. The client may have a claim for losses incurred due to professional negligence. Now, just like the last scenario where they owe you money, the same disputes resolution that's already in place will protect you. However, in this case, you also need to be covered by your professional indemnity insurance. So make sure you have one. And also to stipulate a claimable limit in your client architect agreement. This should always be way lower than the total amount you covered for each and every claim. Now, the claimable limit can be anything from your full fees as a total claimable limit, or double that, or even triple, all depending on the size of the project. 200% of the total fee is a typical limit, as it covers your fee and the next architect should the client need another one. Okay, next stage. The building is complete and your client has moved in. Sometime after occupation, a visitor slips and falls on a stair. There's only a right-handed grab rail, and they happen to be left-handed. And a personal injury claim is made against your client. Now, if this happens during the time you're still liable for your works, your client may choose to make a claim against you. What then? Same. You've got your dispute resolution in place. You've got your professional indemnity insurance in place. But here, you also need public liability insurance for that personal injury. If you look at your PI insurance, you're probably already covered for that. It's often a standard that's included. Let's go to a last scenario. This is the worst one. A client lays a complaint against you with your registration counsel, being SAICAP. In this case, be very aware. SAICAP's investigative committee acts on behalf of the complainant, your client, and they act as counsel and on their behalf and not on the behalf of the professional. Even for items the client isn't complaining about, as they're not aware of them. For example, mandatory clauses that are absent in one's client-architect agreement. SAICAP will lay a charge for those as well. This is again where your PI insurance kicks in, as they would provide the legal representation to you. You may, of course, decide to write your own defense. Again, not so difficult. The committee representing the complainants are usually attorneys. They're not architects. So you need to explain the typical architectural procedure and how that all works so they can understand your position. Should you plead innocent to the charges, SAICAP's investigative committee's charges, you are brought before the independent disciplinary tribunal for a final decision. This tribunal usually consists of a presiding attorney and a couple of senior architects with good legal knowledge. If the tribunal agrees with any of the charges, a fine is issued against the professional for each and every transgression. These fines are based on SAICAP's sanction guidelines. These guidelines are a list of recommended fines for the transgression of each conduct rule. Now, it has come to my attention that many architectural professionals do not include all the provisions in their client-architect agreement as required by SAICAP's conduct rules. These actually happen to be the ones I've just mentioned that are often not provided. termination clause, PI insurance, dispute resolution, and also please remember to always display your category of registration with your SAICAP number in your agreements. So if you're a professional architect, don't just put there your number, put PR Arch with it. They want both. So why does SAICAP strictly require that these provisions are stipulated in your agreements? Their reason is purely for the purpose of protecting the public. That's what SAICAP is there for, to regulate the profession for the benefit of the public. Now, let's always remember that we too are members of the public, so we too demand strict regulation of the professionals that design the buildings that we occupy. Now, that leads me to the importance of understanding how the relative statutory bodies relate to each other. Our regulatory body, SAICAP, is governed by the Architects Act. And SAICAP, together with other building councils, for example, the engineers, the quantity surveyors, etc., they all have their own act, and they all report to the Council for the Built Environment, who in turn reports to the National Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. So now, what about voluntary associations? Many professionals are under the impression that there is no need for VAs as their needs should be addressed by SAICAP. Contrary to this, and provided for in the Architects Act, VAs work with SAICAP to facilitate and regulate the profession. But mainly, VAs exist to represent us, the professionals, to have our concerns heard and addressed. It is the VAs who approach the regulatory bodies like SAICAP with their members' concerns. Now, going back to the subject of this talk, your VA should urge you to include the mandatory clauses in your client architect agreement, as well as advise you who you can contact for legal assistance. This is not only for the purpose of staying out of trouble with SAICAP. I assure you that these provisions, when properly worded, largely protect you, the professional, for your peace of mind. So you can get on with what you do best, designing beautiful buildings. Thank you.
There we are. Thank you, Tanya. That was to the point and good advice. So much appreciated. Right, colleagues, we invite you to submit in the questions box any questions that you might have that you'd like Tanya to answer. But while we're waiting for that, Tanya, maybe just a thought from my side. I have on numerous occasions in the past found that architects like nominating an arbitrator up front when a contract is concluded, let's say, between his client and the builder, the contractor. And there's nothing wrong with that, provided obviously that both agree to that. I'm just wondering how often do professionals, practitioners, apply that to their own agreements with their clients. I'd be interested to hear your take on that. And one of the reasons for me asking this question is that I have found over the years that one of the serious disputes that occurs, particularly with difficult clients and may I say with residential work, is where you consider finishes to be reasonable and your difficult client considers finishes inadequate or not acceptable. And there is that difficulty on site. And the client then thinks that you are siding with the contractor. Is there space to have, let's say, an arbitrator nominated up front, either in your agreement or particularly in your agreement to mediate in those circumstances? Or have you come across that? What's your take on that?
I actually come across it quite often where an arbitrator has already been nominated, and in the JBCC agreement, if you look at the data area, you actually can put in their names. And I have a huge problem with that, because for you to already nominate an arbitrator, you already know this person. Somebody knows them. And you know, to challenge an arbitrator, it's quite easy. All you have to do is say, well, you know, when you see things aren't going your way, you just say, well, they nominated them, they must have known them. No, I would never do that. You mustn't know the arbitrator, and they mustn't know the arbitrator. They might agree to it then, but you're halfway through the arbitration and say, well, you put them there because then you, no, don't take that chance. Get a nominating body who is completely neutral to give you a surprise nomination. No, not someone you know. Funny enough, I'm actually dealing with one now, and I insisted that AOA is rather approached for a nomination. So no, it's a bad idea.
Tanya,
Sorry.
Tanya, before we get to the other questions, maybe the other thing is that sometimes if you nominate an arbitrator, you won't wisely actually understand the speciality. So if it's nominated by the arbitration board, they would look at, because in different instances, there are different requirements in terms of what type of arbitrator and their speciality. Would you agree on that?
Absolutely. You don't know what dispute's going to come up. It could be a legal-based dispute. It could be a building-based dispute. It could be a cancellation issue. It could be a repudiation issue. I mean, there's so many different, and there's specialists in these fields. And there's so many arbitrators at the association, and they pick exactly the right one. In fact, you specify and need someone who knows about that. So yes,
Right,
Gillian, you're right.
Thanks,
So,
Tonya.
Eugene,
Thanks,
I think
Gillian.
we move to some of these questions.
Yes,
Are there
please take us
sample,
through. Yeah.
I'm going to read them because these basically speak the same thing. So Edith Goddard said, are there sample architect-client agreements available anywhere? Ferdinand Oliver, is there a pro forma appointment letter that SAIA can recommend? Well, they're coming so fast. That can be used. Has it been updated? Andrew Walton, is there SAIA client architect agreement is no longer available? Is the Proxa client architect agreement the standard go-to currently? So I think what this is talking about, and most of the questions here from Les Abberton as well, is about client architect agreements and which ones should they be using and where do they access them. I think maybe we can just talk a bit around that.
Right, Tonya, do you want to want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. Very, very recently, because I know quite a few of these agreements, but very recently I was sent an educational version of the latest SAIA client architect agreement. And let me tell you, nothing that I've said in my talk is excluded from that agreement. There's the limit on the claim. It says 200%, I think it was double, yeah, 200%. There's termination clause with a percentage. There's dispute resolution. I mean, it's so detailed, there's nothing missing. And I used to use the old 2008 version, which a few things are missing, so I wouldn't use that. And where you get it is from Fresh Projects. I can't remember what the price is, 400 and some, I can't remember. But it's well worth it because you cover it. You sign it, you put it aside, done. Get creative.
Right. Yes, Tonya, thank you. Can I just reinforce that? SAIA practice over the past few years spent a tremendous amount of time developing that new agreement. It is available at a reduced price for SAIA members, but anyone can purchase it off the Fresh Projects website. And then there is also, and I think it's free of charge, at least to SAIA members, if not to everyone, what we call a letter as contract. It's if you have a small alteration and you just need something, let's say, more digestible, then you can use that. Proxa agreements are definitely agreements to be used on bigger projects, particularly where you have a team of consultants who all want to contract with the client on the same basis. Then Proxa is the go-to, but the SAIA client architect agreement definitely is is the go-to for architectural practitioners on modestly sized projects. The Performer Appointment Letter for SAIA members, Ferdinand, there is a compendium of practice guidelines on the SAIA website, and I speak under correction, but I believe that that appointment letter has been updated and it is on in the compendium, so you're welcome to have a look at that. Gillian, the next one.
Yeah, so we've got one from Sydney Leafy. Thank you, Tanya. Despite putting an agreement in place between yourself and the client, there are clients that become involved in the project during construction. I'm sure we all know that. The client remains involved despite advice against the risks of such involvement. A paper trail is recorded in such cases. Who will SAICAB then protect in such cases?
Let's say, for instance, you in a JBCC agreement. We all know the principal agent, who's mostly the architect, has got full control of everything, and they have to be impartial to both parties. They're not just an agent; they're a principal agent, so they have to be impartial to both parties, the builder and the client, the employer. Should the employer interfere with the principal agent's duties, that's a breach. And if the builder can prove that, that's a breach that needs to be remedied. In fact, they could cancel because of that. So, in fact, about 85% of the arbitrations I deal with could have been solved by the principal agent. They simply often let the client take over. And I understand that. I mean, it's the pocket that feeds you. So they feel they're going to be fired if they don't just let the client have a say. But what is really, okay, yeah, it's the client's property. But when they take over completely, that's bias against the builder. So what is the question? What would SAICAB do about that? No, that's a JBCC issue. SAICAB isn't only there to see if you've transgressed the conduct rules, and the conduct rules have got nothing to do really with the JBCC. As long as you're acting professionally and you're impartial to both parties on the building site, that's it.
So Tanya, both Norman and Sunam Sheng have asked about the SAICAB client architect agreement. So they ask, I think they're basically saying, what is your opinion on the SAICAB architect client agreement?
My opinion on the SAICAB client architect agreement, I've read it once. My feeling is, look, SAICAB's there to protect the public, not there to protect the client. So if you're going to be writing up a contract for yourself, you're obviously going to use something from a voluntary association that's there to protect you. As long as it includes everything I'm saying, that there's a percentage on termination, that you are covered in dispute, that no lawyer can come and intimidate you, then it's fine. What do I think about the SAICAB? The SAICAB one is there. It's there to protect the client.
Okay, thank you. And then Sadiq asked, can we get copies or links to all these documents if we're not SAIA members? So look, I think that's a practice issue, Eugene, or that's a SAIA issue. I think what one wants to elaborate here is that really essentially it's really important that people either join SAIA or SAIAT or whoever their professional body is, and actually work with their VAs to be able to access the information from their VAs. And most of the VAs would have agreements in place, or there would be like the fresh project agreements that are purchasable on those websites. I think let's look at what Tim Harlock-Jones is saying. In the PROXA, there is a section for limit of consultant's liability, and then the following professional indemnity insurance section. Can you elaborate further about the difference between how the first section is filled in, either available proceeds specific amount or twice the fees versus the full professional indemnity insurance, which in some cases is quite a large amount.
Yeah. Your professional indemnity insurance will have a limit on every case. Let's say yours is 5 million. That's acceptable. As long as your fees are not 5 million. So you always keep it lower than that. And double your fees. How many fees are, I mean, what are we doing? Are we doing a Dubai hotel? So then you'd be far more covered than 5 million. So you'd always have a limit which is far, and I mean far lower than your limit on each and every claim.
Right, and then I think, Eugene, a last one from Gabrielle Puna. Is there a way to make a client pay outstanding fees except by going to court?
Must I answer?
Yes, if you.
Yeah, no, you're not going to court. You've got a dispute resolution that specifies, it provides for alternative dispute resolution. That's why you either go to mediation and you make it enforceable, or adjudication and you make it enforceable. And then they both can be appealed by arbitration. You don't want to go to court. That's why you have your dispute resolution in place, so that they cannot go to court and you don't go to court either. You'll never get your money. Unless it's maybe small claims court because it's less than 100,000 Rand, it might be okay.
Yes, and
I'll go to mediation.
Yeah, can I just add to that? You can go to alternative dispute resolution, but Gabriel, if your agreement is very clear up front, the service you need to render and the fee that you will earn, if you submit an account and the fee has not been paid, in other words, it all depends on whether the client is now disputing your service or not. But if he's not disputing your service and he's just not claiming paying, then your best bet is either a lawyer or to write off the fees. Some architect practitioners even work on an upfront retainer to cover that eventuality. That is a challenge, but nevertheless. Can I just, in closing, if I may, Gillian, just go back to a question that was posed, and I forget now.
Yes, I saw it. I was actually just looking at that one. Gerard,
yeah, I wonder whether he can't maybe just send a bit more information through to SAIA. You can send it to practice@saia.org.za, because it's difficult to understand the context of that question, if you don't mind. And then just Francois Norkier has just submitted a question. Are you allowed to stop work if fees are not being paid? And Tanya, would you like to answer that one?
Yes, that doesn't even have to be in your agreement. That's just common law. You need to have a client architect agreement in place as per the conduct rules. But let's say you don't. Yeah, of course you can stop.
Yes, and may I say that the SAIA client architect agreement does make provision for that. If you are not paid, that you can suspend your work. So just another reason why. Make sure that you have your agreement up front. Colleagues, thank you very, very much. Tanya, that stimulated a lot of reaction, and this just goes to show that practicing in South Africa in 2022 is not for sissies. But thank you for reminding us of the importance of having an agreement, a good agreement, and for structuring the dispute resolution clauses and using them. So then, colleagues, that ends this session, and now we have our privilege is to introduce our sponsors to you once again. Please stay online for the next 5 minutes. We're going to be just having a video from our sponsors, and then we're going to start with the second presentation, which you will enjoy. You will find it inspiring and stimulating. So see you in a few minutes' time. Over to the sponsors, Karina.
Every minute of every day, the SAIAshare Group is working to make products that make a world of difference. To homeowners and business owners, to families and to communities. The SAIAshare Group is a multinational company with operations covering Eastern, Central and Southern Africa. The group is Africa's largest producer of steel roofing and sheeting and the first producer of aluminium zinc-coated steel on the continent. With over 36 businesses and insights gathered over 50 years, the SAIAshare Group has remained at the forefront in providing products that lead the industry. The group opened its first manufacturing facility in Mombasa, Kenya in 1962 and has grown steadily, now operating in 12 countries, using the world's leading aluminium zinc metal coating technology and state-of-the-art color coating processes to produce the coil used by its roofing operations. The outputs of more than 30 roof manufacturing operations make the SAIAshare Group the largest producer of metal roof sheeting in Africa. A full range of associated products are also available to provide a complete solution from one trusted source. The group is founded on a bold vision: to make a world of difference. The SAIAshare Group roofing operations strive to provide customers with the best metal products they can afford, suiting all applications, from residential homes to offices, commercial and industrial applications. Steel sheeting is roll-formed in factories or on-site, in various profiles and finishes, and supplied complete with accessories for a complete roofing solution. At the group's metal coating plants, steel is coated to give it a longer lifespan. The SAIAshare Group was the first producer of aluminium zinc-coated steel in Africa, the world's most advanced coating alloy to deliver an extended service life to steel. Metal-coated steel is sold under the brand name Zincal. Color-coated Zincal is sold under the brand names Color Plus, Optima and Optima Plus, in an array of popular colors that are both durable and beautiful. To complement its roofing brands, specialist products have been developed by the SAIAshare Group, such as the fixed-tight fastener products, steel pipes and hollow sections, and other value-added accessories for the building industry. The SAIAshare Group lays great store on being a socially responsible corporate citizen. Its focus is primarily on the communities in which it operates, particularly those who are most affected by poverty and social disadvantage. The group also supports innovators who serve as role models for community upliftment. Steel is uniquely placed to help communities across Africa meet the challenges of development in a sustainable, responsible manner. And at the end of its life, steel is 100% recyclable, helping minimize the impact of the built environment on our precious planet. The SAIAshare Group is committed to finding solutions today for a better tomorrow and to making a world of difference.
Welcome back, everybody, and once again, thank you to our sponsors for another interesting clip on their products. And today I'm going to introduce Paul Carter, and Paul has worked both in Bloemfontein, Gauteng, Limpopo, and now currently in the Eastern Cape. Paul is a looks a very young architect, but he's not so young. He's a father, and I found it quite interesting. He doesn't consider himself only to be an architect, but he considers himself to be a husband and a father. That tells you a little bit about the man that he is. Paul has had a substantial amount of access to, has worked across quite a few projects and has been awarded 2 awards of merit in the Limpopo region. And I think when you get to hear Paul, you'll actually understand why. He's clearly a very sensitive person in terms of understanding life, understanding architecture, getting into the big and small elements of architecture and life. He has a family that comes from an art background, and as Paul said to me, they had a mindset for needing to understand, how do you make things, how do you assemble things. And when Paul does his presentation, I think it's going to be quite clear as to where that thinking has taken him. It's an interesting process that he's going to explain to us in terms of using his solar studies. And I think Paul is going to be an interesting architect to watch in the future. And Paul, it was wonderful chatting to you earlier today again, and thank you very much. We look forward to a very interesting take on your poetics in architecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that most kind and generous introduction, Gillian. So yes, today I'm going to tell you a bit of a story about my deep dive into the solar studies in architecture. The pale blue dot is a photograph of planet Earth taken on February 14th in 1990 by the Voyager 1 space probe from a record distance of about 6 billion kilometers as a part of a series of images of the solar system. In this photograph, Earth's apparent size is less than a pixel. The planet appears as a tiny dot against the vastness of space, among bands of sunlight reflected by the camera. The phrase pale blue dot was coined by the astronomer Carl Sagan in his reflection on this photograph's significance. Light travels 150.84 million kilometers from the sun to reach the Earth as it revolves around the sun. The light makes this journey along a completely predictable path and touches the Earth for only a moment. The Earth's relationship to the sun has also defined our concept of years, days, and hours. The science of light. This is the part of designing the solar studies which we have been taught and practiced. Light is possibly the most critical element to consider in our climate regarding passive sustainable design, to optimize the building orientation, refine solar geometry, shading strategies, daylighting, and thermal massing. So I think this has become, part and parcel of every project that we do and is essentially expected of us as architects as well. In this, there's an example of where we use solar studies to explore shading strategies to maximize the winter heat gain in a building while protecting the building from the summer sun. The software we use has become invaluable in projecting heat gain and lux levels, and these tools enable us to explore numerous permutations in an effort to find the optimum solutions. Next component of light which I would like to discuss is the art of light. Imagine if light would not only provide optimum visibility for tasks, but convey meanings as well. Recommended lux levels for various visual tasks have led to a quantitative understanding of lighting. However, lighting can be used to contribute to emotion in rooms and to structure architecture. Would it be adequate to regard lighting as language sent by architects and being received by occupants? Adding a semiotic perspective can help us recognize how light and shadow contributes to the meaning of the built environment. In this image, a classroom is a classroom in an early childhood development center which we designed. The translucent panels aid in flooding the classrooms with diffused natural light. However, when children step onto the stage, they turn into little performers against this illuminated backdrop, which simultaneously allow passers-by to catch a glimpse into the life within the building. My fascination with this has, gave me the opportunity to explore it a little bit further. The opportunity came when when we started planning our first family home. The goal was to create a building which is specific to the site as well as to the user, they now being our family. The idea was to have a building essentially function as a solar calendar and as a sundial to mark the birthdays of each family member within the home. All we needed to do to achieve this was to tie together the movement of the Earth around the Sun, the Earth's rotation on its axis, the precise location of the house, the gamble at that stage on the pending birth date of our youngest son, as my wife was pregnant, and then all of the general inconsistencies and challenges which we face in a construction project. So what could go wrong? Key variables which I identified at that stage which would influence this was the specific location of the site, the users, the people, and then time becoming quite a critical component in this process, which I'd like to take you through. So the location and precise orientation of the building was critical. So defining this constant is imperative. Confirming the detailed site location as well as the precise orientation was important, as I said. Regarding the location, geolocation capabilities of our CAD software was sufficient. The precise orientation was more of a challenge, as the accuracy of the north arrow on an SG diagram, when you scale it up, could be fractions of a degree out, which would be problematic due to the precision required by this exercise. So we organize our lives around time and have varying levels of significance associated with certain dates. In this instance, we used acid-etched copper tiles with each family member's initials and birthday etched on them, which would be the targets of these light beads. The time on the tile was the only variable which we could control and manipulate. As we were a family of 3 at the time and my wife was pregnant with our second son, we had to gamble a little and truly trust the science of our doctor's projected date of his birth, because the building would be done shortly before he was born. So to do this, we needed an aperture, which was the entry point for the light to enter into the building. The aperture was a purpose-made steel window glazed on the exterior as well as the interior. The design intended to guide a rectangular beam of light with a crisp edge. It is positioned on the eastern wall of the living room, and the position needed to be coordinated as to not receive shadows or any interference from any of the adjacent structures or plants. Every second, every location's position in correlation to the sun changes, but this repeats annually, well, almost precisely. The data is essentially illustrated as 2 key metrics, azimuth and altitude. Azimuth is the direction of a celestial object, in this instance the sun, from the observer, essentially the angular measurement on the horizontal plane between solar north and the sun at any given time. The altitude is the angle of the sun relative to the Earth's horizon. On the right, you will see the key data which was gathered for each of these dates. We projected this over a 6-year period to find the average, as one needs to accommodate for leap years as well, because every year obviously has a quarter of an additional day. I've just bolded over there the little sections which indicate the averaged angles which were then used. Precision. So using the intended furniture layout of the house, I was then able to manipulate the time of day, as this was the only variable we could control. This was done to ensure that the subject tiles would remain visible in the house once it's all completed and we've moved in. Once the aperture window was installed, we then assessed the precise as-built dimensions of the space and the location of this aperture window. Furthermore, numerous site visits were done to record the position of light at recorded times. This data could then be used to plot back onto drawings, and the building's precise orientation could be confirmed, updated, and the final projections be confirmed. As you can think, your set out points on a site are accurate, but when you're working at this scale and precision, the accuracy is actually quite interesting. And in this instance, we realized that the entire area we live is about a degree off what it's recorded on documents, which Okay, so this is the drawing which was issued. So after many hours of research, planning, and testing this very basic construction drawing was issued, which only contained 12 dimensions. I always think of this as a fine example of what architects do versus what clients think architects do. The proof of concept. So the house was completed and we moved in on the 25th of March in 2019. So on the 4th of April 2019, our gamble, or let's say our trust in our doctor, paid off, and our little boy Jackson was born on the intended day on a cloudy Thursday morning. So thanks to the weather, there was no eureka moment to witness. So we'd have to wait to see whether or not this was going to work. 2 weeks later, on the sunny morning of the 15th of April, as the next birthday arrived, a sleep-deprived mother of a newborn baby was home to witness the event, only to see nothing happen, and she was perplexed. Later on, she realized that in a sleep-deprived state, she had looked an hour later than what she should have. So it was missed, and the wait continued to see whether or not this worked. Then on the 17th of October, 2019, the sun was out and this was the day. So I rushed home from work early in the morning to see whether or not this overly elaborate master plan would actually work. In a nervous state of anticipation, I was left speechless to witness it all come together. I was humbled as I witnessed this fleeting moment as the planets quite literally aligned. On these photographs, if one zooms in a little bit there, you can see the specific times as well. 4 months later, the opportunity came again to see whether or not it was a fluke that this had worked in October, and whether this would actually work on multiple days as was intended. In this photograph, you can actually see position of a tile and some point in the day, and then the faint spot of light in the distance there being the aperture window. So between the chaos of setting up for a children's party, we as a family for the first time were able to witness this moment. Even though our kids were too young to read time or understand a calendar, they could anticipate their birthdays approaching as the sun tracked nearer and nearer their tiles in the weeks leading up to their birthdays. So there's a time lapse of this instance in the 15th of February in 2021. With a little bit more planning into capturing this moment, again in October 2021, I'd like to conclude with this. Once every day, the Earth also travels on an elliptical orbit around the Sun, and it takes 1 year to make this complete trip. As our planet revolves around the Sun, that light travels 150 kilometers to reach a little patch of land in the north of South Africa, and it enters a house through a window, bounces off a small little copper tile in a moment of wonder, placing a little boy center stage in this vast cosmic arena.
Thank you, Paul. I was waiting for the video with the sound. I loved the sound. It was just so dramatic, and I think it must be an incredible experience for your children. And I think once again, the really important thing about this is it sort of elaborates again how much time and energy goes into design, which our clients very seldom actually understand. They look at that drawing with a little couple of lines and they go like, they're paying so much money for this. So yes, thank you very much. I'm going to head to the first question from Cecile Slavitt. Good day. May we ask what program or software you use for energy calculations?
For general lighting calculations and heat gain, we've used Enscape in the past. It has a good, a lot of the software has built-in data for that, but what we've used for that has been Enscape.
And then from Sydney Leafy. Sydney, thank you. You always give us questions, and I love that. Well done, Paul. Truly inspiring. Jennifer Whitfield, beautiful. Devon Vermeulen, that is so cool, Paul. Well done. Nice, strong concept. Edith Goddard, amazing. Well done on the patience and the effort endured. Incredible. Very positive. I have to ask you one question. What happens one day when you sell your home and somebody else buys it? They inherit your family forever.
No, well, we can remove the little copper tiles, and you know, I suppose I could go through the same exercise to plot their lives into this building as well. After being through the process once, it would be substantially simpler to do now.
Yes, you know, Gillian, can I just make a comment while the comments are coming through? You know, for me, this is where architecture actually touches humanity. And I say that because of the effect that this has on a child growing up, a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old child seeing this and being able to see his existence in space and in time. And I think that, you know, for us, it's wonderful to see, and it was a pleasure to see that last video clip. But the effect that we have on people, and the effect that architecture and space and light and texture can have intentionally. I just find this a wonderful reminder of why we are architects and why we've got to go that extra mile. And even if our clients don't see what we're doing, we do it because we know we are contributing to the lives of people, making a difference. Okay.
So Eugene, I think also a comment I made to Paul earlier when I was chatting to him is that I think this is a combination of what we as architects do, which is the scientific side, the creative side, the logical side, but then also there's a spiritual side to this. It's something beyond just the normal realm. It's creating another level of spiritual connectivity to one's environment, which I think actually is incredible. And I think that's what we want to be doing. We want to, and I think you summed it up in speaking about the humanity. And I think that, Paul, you've done very successfully, and I think we look forward to some very exciting projects in the future from you. Let's have a look what we have. Francois Goddard, still very nice, Paul. Mathematics at work, Euramaster. Cecile Slubbert, thank you from Floris Slubbert. I'm just using Cecile's computer. Thank you. Mark Roth says, is Paul aware of the work of Stanley Saitovitz? Sorry, I don't want to say that incorrectly. Are you aware of that work? No, but I'm pretty sure we will all be looking at what that is, because we've definitely got a queue. Yes, any other questions from everybody out there? I think everybody's very impressed with what you've done, Paul, and you know, we're happy to have people like you as part of the Institute and as part of SAIA. You make us proud. We're so glad to have young, and I say young because, you know, you still look young compared to Eugene and us and myself. Well done. That was great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Gillian. Colleagues, yes, this is, in fact, today was what SAIAshare is all about. It's both Tanya and Paul are SAIA members, members who are willing to give of their own time and effort and knowledge to feed into the profession. So SAIAshare at its best. Thank you once again, Tanya and Paul. We really appreciate your input. Then I just want to thank our sponsors again, Christopher and the SAFAL Group. It's a privilege to be able to work with sponsors who support us, and we just want to point out that SAFAL are hosting a CPD presentation on the 24th of May, so please take note of that. Thanks to all of you who attended. Colleagues, if you don't attend, SAIAshare doesn't exist. So please remember the first Friday of every month, except January, when we all have hangovers. But hangovers, just Christmas hangovers, if I may qualify there. But for every other month, please do attend. We've got some exciting presenters lined up for you already. If you have any comments or suggestions for the future, even topics and presenters that you can draw our attention to, pop them into the comments box. Remember that SAIAshare carries a 0.1 category, 1 CPD value. That means that if you attend 10 of these events in a year, you cover your 1 point. But here's a caution. Remember that these certificates can only be issued to those who attend full events. Logging in for part of the time or attending for part of the time will regrettably, in terms of the CPD regulations, not qualify you for a point. You are most welcome to view all previous SAIAshare events. You can access them via the SAIA website and ECPD websites. Right, then our next event happens on the first Friday of June, which is the 3rd of June, once again at 2:30. Now, when I was a young schoolboy, and dreaming of an architect, I became aware of a firm of architects from East London because they planned the extensions to the little school that I attended in the deep rural northeastern Cape. Their name at that stage was Osmond Lang, van der Verre, Harof, Goldswyn and Burger. That was the full name. They are one of the oldest practices in the country, and they celebrate their centenary in 3 years' time. In this time, I'm sure that the company has reinvented itself on numerous occasions. John Dovey joined them as a new graduate in 1980 from the University of Port Elizabeth, and he remained involved in the practice for 40 years until he retired a couple of years ago in 2020. That's a 40-year career in one company. And I hope that they gave him the gold watch for that achievement. He served as the managing director of Osmond Lang for more than half of the time that he was involved. So John is eminently qualified to speak on the topic, Adapt or Die, Observations from 40 Years of Architectural Evolution. Our second presenter the next month is Jonathan Noble, known to many of you. Jonathan is a professor in architecture at the University of the Free State. He has written a book on a well-known architect, one whose name we are all familiar with, architect Peter Rich. Jonathan will be sharing with us not only about the man Peter and his work, but also about that's Jonathan's personal journey of discovery while writing the book. He will be intrigued by this as well. Colleagues, then I leave you with a quote from the Lion King. The past can hurt, but from the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it. Those are the words spoken by Rafiki, the delightful mandrill in in the Lion King. And especially for those of us in the profession who are hurting and who got hurt during the COVID time, let's learn from it. Please join us on Friday, the 3rd of June, 2022. I wish you all a pleasant weekend. Goodbye.